Kris Kristofferson seemed to have everything. He had chiseled good looks, athletic prowess, serious smarts, and his boots in both country music and popular Hollywood movies. Kris Kristofferson and Rita Coolidge were the it couple of the 70s. But years after their split, Coolidge finally opened up about what really happened between them, and her revelation was absolutely brutal. But more on that later. Kris Kristofferson was born on June 22, 1936, in Brownsville, Texas. His father, Lars Henry, was an army man, and he hoped his son would follow in his footsteps. Kris Kristofferson had an interest in battles, just not ones on a battlefield. A teenage Kristofferson wanted to fight for the rights of others, and he did this through writing. The Atlantic Monthly even published some of his first essays. In 1958, Kris Kristofferson got a Rhodes Scholarship and headed to the University of Oxford. He excelled at sports, rugby and boxing, but something else started while he was there. He started writing songs, and with the help of another student, he met up with an agent named Larry Parnes. Parnes came up with the unique idea of how to package Kristofferson to sell to British audiences. Parnes' idea to promote Kris Kristofferson was to call him a Yank at Oxford. He also decided to trim his name to Kris Carson. Parnes' plan didn't work, and Kristofferson met up with failure. Kristofferson's reaction was surprising. None of this really bothered him, as music wasn't his ultimate goal. He actually wanted to write novels. After spending time in Germany with the 8th Infantry Division, Kristofferson got a transfer to teach at the prestigious West Point Academy. But Kristofferson had hit a limit. He left the army and decided to revisit something that hadn't quite worked out for him the first time: music. His first attempt was in songwriting. Kristofferson's parents did not want a musician in the family, so when they found out that their son wanted to be one, they disowned him. This did little to dissuade Kristofferson, and he and his wife moved to Nashville, Tennessee, so he could be at the center of the country music scene. By this time, Kris Kristofferson and his wife had a son and a daughter. Their son, Kris Jr., was not healthy. He had trouble with his esophagus, and the cost of keeping him healthy was eating into Kristofferson's small salary. This was a difficult time for Kristofferson and his wife, and they divorced in 1968. Kris Kristofferson had a job cleaning up at Columbia Recording Studios, and he had a plan to get his music noticed. While working at the studio, he'd met June Carter, and he urged her to give her husband, Johnny Cash, a copy of his music. Carter did give Kristofferson's tape to Cash, but the legendary performer did not listen to it. Instead, he put the tape on a pile with all the other hopefuls, and Kristofferson was back to square one. Around this time, Kristofferson had a job flying helicopters, a skill he'd learned while with the military, and he came up with a way to get Cash to notice him. The story goes that Kris Kristofferson decided to land a helicopter right in Cash's front lawn. Some say that Kristofferson leapt off the helicopter and walked up to Cash, holding a beer in one hand and a bunch of songs in the other. One of the songs on the tape that Kristofferson had given Cash was Sunday Mornin' Comin' Down, and Cash liked it. He liked it enough to record it, and Kristofferson was soon the recipient of Song of the Year from the Country Music Association Awards. Cash wanted to showcase Kristofferson's song on The Johnny Cash Show, but the studio executives had a problem. In the lyrics, there is the word stoned, and they didn't think Cash's family audience would appreciate it. Cash stood up to the execs, and he sang the song the way Kristofferson had written it. Over the next few years, more than a few musicians recorded Kristofferson's songs. The list includes mostly male singers, from Jerry Lee Lewis to Ray Stevens. One of the first women to record a Kristofferson song was Janis Joplin. Before Janis Joplin recorded Kristofferson's Me and Bobby McGee, she and Kristofferson dated. But there was a sad ending to this love story. They had already broken up when she recorded it, and Joplin didn't live long enough to see the song become a huge hit. Joplin passed due to an overdose in 1970. While waiting to board a plane at LAX, Kris Kristofferson bumped into fellow musician Rita Coolidge. The two got to talking, and Kristofferson was so smitten that he changed his plans and got off in Memphis with Coolidge. These two musicians were at the beginning of their careers, and dating each other seemed like a good idea. Kris Kristofferson was enjoying the success of other people recording his songs, but things changed in 1969 at the Newport Folk Festival. Once again, it was Cash who was stepping in and giving Kristofferson a break. During his set, Cash called Kristofferson to join him on stage. Back in 1970, Kris Kristofferson released his first album simply called Kristofferson, but it failed to thrill audiences. Joplin's recording of Me and Bobby McGee certainly helped with Kristofferson's level of fame, so in 1971, when he released The Silver-Tongued Devil and I, fans were already on board with all things Kristofferson. As a member of the outlaw country music scene, Kris Kristofferson was amassing an interesting collection of friends. One of them was rebellious director and actor Dennis Hopper. Hopper was a role model for the counterculture movement, and he wanted Kristofferson along for the ride. The movie was The Last Movie, and Kristofferson, Hopper, and the rest of the cast headed down to Peru to begin filming. Kris Kristofferson received another script. This was for Cisco Pike, and Kristofferson would be the lead acting opposite Karen Black and Gene Hackman. This was another counterculture film, and in it, Kristofferson plays a musician in a battle against the police. The release of Cisco Pike came around the same time as America began a battle against drug culture. There was also an economic collapse that sent audiences in search of feel-good movies. Cisco Pike didn't do well, and it didn't help that at the same time, Hopper released The Last Movie to bad reviews. Kristofferson's first forays into acting were both a disaster. If Kristofferson wanted a career in mainstream Hollywood, counterculture denizens like Hopper were not the ones to help him get it. What would help him was a romantic comedy. He found one in 1973's Bloom in Love, and Kristofferson was once again playing a musician. Lucky for Kristofferson, this movie was a hit, and it gave him some serious movie clout. Kris Kristofferson made 3 movies with acclaimed director Sam Peckinpah, and none of them were successful. Kristofferson walked away from Peckinpah and turned to something he knew well: sports. Semi-Tough placed Kristofferson opposite Burt Reynolds, and they played 2 football players in love with the same woman. Both Kristofferson and Reynolds knew how to play football, but when the director matched them with real-life players, things got out of control. Both Kristofferson and Reynolds realized they had to get in shape for Semi-Tough, so they started working out together. Apparently, this wasn't enough. When Kristofferson started playing with actual professional athletes, they were in for a big surprise. The players hit him hard enough to break bones. Tough guy director Martin Scorsese was preparing to make a very out-of-character film, comedy drama, Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. Kris Kristofferson got the role of a rancher named David, who had 2 children that he has no relationship with. Playing the role was hard for Kristofferson. It made him face the fact that he also had 2 children that he'd left behind. Scorsese took a liking to Kristofferson for 2 reasons. Kristofferson was somehow able, maybe through charm or good looks, to calm down building owners when filming went overtime. Scorsese also said that Kristofferson was one of his favorite leading men. He said he was a silent, masculine hero. Kristofferson didn't stay in the rom-com mode for long, and his next feature film raised quite a few eyebrows. This was 1976's The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea. This R-rated movie had Kristofferson and his co-star Sarah Miles in some very intimate scenes. When it came time to do publicity for the film, Kristofferson got himself into a heap of trouble. To promote The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea, someone in marketing had the great idea to have Kristofferson and his co-star do a sensual photo shoot for Playboy magazine. Kristofferson said he was under the influence when the photo shoot took place, and because of that, he seemed to have forgotten one important thing. Kris Kristofferson and Rita Coolidge had tied the knot in 1973, and unsurprisingly, she was not happy with her husband posing in such intimate positions with another woman. The promo photo shoot put their marriage on the rocks, but Kristofferson wouldn't have time to work on fixing it. He was about to get a call that would change his life. While he was still married to Coolidge, Kristofferson got the call for a really important film. The offer was to play a has-been musician opposite triple threat Barbra Streisand. If he felt inflated by the offer, he probably didn't know the truth. Streisand had really wanted Elvis Presley to play the role and had gone to great lengths to get him. The first problem Kristofferson had on A Star Is Born was with the director. Frank Pearson was a veteran of World War II, and he had a problem with Kristofferson. He didn't like the fact that Kristofferson was in the army, but somehow managed to avoid going to Vietnam. For this reason, the two did not get along. Kristofferson and Streisand were not getting along during the filming of A Star Is Born. Kristofferson would later say that working with the funny girl star almost made him want to stop making movies. He compared working on A Star Is Born to the strenuous Ranger School, which prepares soldiers for close combat on the battlefield. In A Star Is Born, Kristofferson had a fight scene with Robert Englund, who would go on to play Scary Freddy in A Nightmare on Elm Street. The thing was, Kristofferson thought that Englund was a stuntman and not an actor. It ended in disaster. When Kristofferson went to punch Englund, he got too close and actually broke the guy's nose. Like his character in A Star Is Born, Kris Kristofferson had a drinking problem. At the end of the movie, spoiler alert, Kristofferson's character causes a terrible car accident that takes his life. When Kristofferson was working on that scene, he realized that this could actually happen to him. This morbid thought helped him quit drinking cold turkey. A Star Is Born was not much of a darling with the critics, but it did pull in decent box office results. And while Oscar night wasn't big for the film, the people at the Golden Globes seemed to love it. The film took home 5 trophies, and Kristofferson ended up with one for Best Actor in a Musical or Comedy. With this accolade behind him, Kristofferson would have the pick of films. Writer-director Michael Cimino was hot off the success of his Academy Award-winning film, The Deer Hunter. For his next project, he was making a film called Heaven's Gate, and he wanted Kristofferson as the leading man. The studio was giving Cimino whatever he wanted to make this film. Sadly, it would quickly turn into one of the biggest disasters in cinematic history. Heaven's Gate soon became a running joke in Hollywood as being an over-budget disaster. To make that absolutely clear, it received 5 nominations at that year's Golden Raspberry Awards. While Cimino took home Worst Director, Kristofferson had a different humiliation. He received 2 nominations that year, one for Heaven's Gate and another for Rollover with Jane Fonda. Still reeling from the disaster that was Heaven's Gate, Kristofferson faced another hardship. His marriage to Coolidge was ending. The two appeared together on The Muppet Show and then divorced. Years after their divorce, Rita Coolidge opened up about what had happened between her and Kris Kristofferson, and what she revealed was brutal. Coolidge claimed that he would constantly put her down, especially downplaying her musical success, even though she was making a new album almost every year. When writer David S. Goyer was writing a screenplay that turned vampire fighting Blade from a comic book into a movie, he had actor Samuel Fuller pegged for the supporting character, Whistler. That was fine, but the director had someone else in mind. He wanted Kristofferson because he thought he was a cool grandfather type of guy. In 1992, singer-songwriter Sinead O'Connor had gotten into trouble when she tore up a picture of the Pope on Saturday Night Live. 2 weeks after that incident, O'Connor was appearing with Kristofferson at a tribute concert for Bob Dylan. When O'Connor got on stage, the crowd booed her. Kristofferson offered support with 7 unforgettable words. "Don't let the get you down." O'Connor's response was equally iconic. In tears, she looked at Kristofferson with gratitude and said, "I'm not down." Kris Kristofferson spent his last years with his third wife, Lisa Myers. They were splitting their lives between homes in California and Hawaii. On September 28, 2024, Kristofferson's life came to a close. When he passed, he was at his home in Hawaii, and around him were various members of his family. Left to mourn were his wife, 8 children, and 7 grandchildren. When he was young, Kris Kristofferson often had a negative view about his future. In fact, he said he probably wouldn't make it past 30. Lucky for him, he was totally wrong, and he lived to the ripe old age of 88. If you enjoyed this Factinate video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more incredible stories. Want to say and who we cover next? Join our membership program through the link in the description for exclusive perks. Your support means everything to us. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.